Hello there. My name is Jasom Jensai, and welcome to this stream where we're going to be talking about episode 2. Is it bad? Is it good? What do I think about all the little details about that? Also, we're going to, excuse me. Uh, Also, we're going to talk about how powerful are Rey and Ben Solo, and the last thing we're going to talk about is what is the best capital ship. You might hear a lot of background noise. I tried like a dozen different things to try and fix it, but I don't know. My computer's just being very noisy right now. Maybe the fan will calm down a bit later in the stream, but for now, I think you're just gonna have to deal with the noise, and I'll try and speak louder, speak directly into the microphone. So I hope that's fine. But before we get into everything I have planned for the rest of the stream, let's start with the question of the stream. And as always, this is worth 10 points. So if you get it right, you get 10 points. You only get one guess, and only the first person to get it right gets the points. The question is, what species is Dexter Jetster? It's a pretty self-explanatory question. It's not one where I have to be like, so what I mean by this question is this. It's just, what species is Dexter Jetster? So let's move on to Attack of the Clones. So this movie, for a long time, was my least favorite movie. Currently, or I should say, since, like, I've had a lot of time to reflect on the sequels and kind of established where they go in the hierarchy. It's been higher. And actually, this last time I watched it yesterday, it's the only time I had time for it. I probably could have done it today, but I had time yesterday. So I watched it yesterday, and I really enjoyed it. There's a few things that I didn't like. I never really liked them. One of the things, and this is like the big thing that usually ruins it for me. It's still a good movie, but it brings it a lot lower on the totem pole of Star Wars movies, is Anakin and Padme's romance scenes. Especially when Anakin's acting creepy and weird. It's fine if he acts awkward, but the awkwardness I also don't like that much. But the creepiness is kind of where I'm like, well, I just don't like this at all. I wish this wasn't in the movie. I wish they'd just didn't even have a scene in the movie. It'd be better if there was nothing there. I'd rather have Jar Jar than creepy Anakin, to be honest. So those scenes are good, but this last time I watched it, it wasn't too bad. It actually didn't seem like that much of the movie, and maybe that's just because I was focusing on the good parts. But I don't know. So you got they go to Naboo, and I love Naboo. It's a great place. It looks nice. But yeah, and then there's all the outfits Padme wears, which kind of makes sense, but not really. She's on the run. She should be wearing not not that kind of outfit. And then I do like some of the things they talk about, aggressive negotiations. When they talk about that, it's great. I like that. And there's a lot of just normal conversations they have, but some of them are just kind of awkward. It kind of feels creepy sometimes. Sometimes it's just kind of boring, and sometimes it just makes you super uncomfortable. But moving on from Anakin and Padme, moving on to the other thing, not super tiny nitpick detail type thing that I don't like about Attack of the Clones, is Anakin and Obi-Wan versus Dooku. A lot of people don't like Yoda versus Dooku, because Yoda's flipping around and it doesn't seem realistic, but if you look at his size and if you look at how the Force affects his fighting style, it kind of makes sense. I don't know, maybe it doesn't really make sense, but how I understand it, it makes sense in my mind. But focusing on Anakin versus Dooku, a lot of the choreography in this is kind of silly. I do like the very beginning, when Anakin rushes forward and gets hit by Force lightning, and then Obi-Wan blocks it with his lightsaber. That's cool. But then, once Obi-Wan and Dooku start fighting, it's somewhat fencing, but also not really fencing, and they didn't really mesh it together, especially when Anakin starts fighting Dooku. There is that moment right when he gets the second lightsaber. Obi-Wan throws it and he starts twirling with it. That's a cool move. I've tried that. It's pretty scary. Yeah, so that's fun. But then when he gets his hand chopped off, he holds out his arm and Dooku chops it off. It's not like Dooku knocks his blade to the side and then slices it off. It's he holds out his arm, waits a second, and then gets his arm chopped off. And then there's the whole Yoda versus Dooku, which I think is a great fight. The one thing I do wish they did differently is maybe start with lightsaber and then go somehow transition into the Force. Like maybe Yoda like Force pushes him back and is like, clearly this contest cannot be decided by our skills in the lightsaber, but in the Force, I know I can beat you, or something like that. And then if that had happened, then they could get in a Force duel and Yoda could show his mastery of the Force. And then that would easily transition into Count Dooku crushing the pillar and having a drop on them so he can escape. I don't know. That's just an idea. Maybe it wouldn't work. Maybe this is just better. But I don't know. That sounds a lot cooler to me. Not a lot. It sounds a little bit cooler to me. But I do like this fight. It's very cool. I like it. Getting to see Yoda's fighting style is always super fun, and Dooku's lightsaber style is also really cool. I think they did a better job with his fighting style in the Clone Wars, especially with when he fights Anakin and Obi-Wan in the episode of the Lost Ones with the Pike Syndicate. That fight is so cool. They just nailed everybody there. They just nailed it. But this one is also great. I like it, and it's live action, so you've got some more limitations that you have to work with, but it also looks more realistic. And speaking of realistic, a lot of people don't like the CGI in the prequels. Yoda looks great in CGI. Like, I don't know if people can even argue that Yoda looks better in puppet form than in CGI form, because he just looks more realistic. So, yeah, and I don't really want to dwell too much on CGI because it's kind of becoming a more and more it's becoming an argument that people use less and less. I don't know. At least that's how it seems to me. Maybe it's getting more and more in your experience, but I guess everyone has a different experience probably. So another fight I want to talk about is Obi-Wan Kenobi versus Jango Fett. And I do like this fight. It's super awesome. I love seeing Jango in action and how he actually knows how to fight Jedi. He like gets away from them. He doesn't go up next to them. He uses his missile. He uses his guns. It's super fun. Sorry for the dog in the background, by the way. But I don't even know if you can hear the dog, but I would assume you can. Anyways, so Obi-Wan versus Jango. It's a great fight. But the one thing I really don't like about that fight is he gets knocked over the edge. Obi-Wan is falling over the edge, and he's got this tiny little string that is wrapped around his hands, and he comes to a complete stop, like on the end of the string, and it's just like his hands would get ripped off, and he would keep going, and even if not, it would be the same as hitting the ground. There might be a little bit more stretch there, but like it's mostly the same as hitting the ground. So he may as well have just face planted into the ground. And then there's after that, like Jango lets him go, and he like swings it around and hooks it on something, and then hangs onto that tiny little string. And again, it's a super tiny string. There's no way he's gonna hang on to that, even with the Force. It would be better if he like force pulled like I don't know, some like I don't know. There just should be a better way to do that. At least in my opinion. But yeah, that's the only thing I don't like about that fight. Everything else is so awesome, like the rain, the lightsaber, the blaster bolts, jetpack, Mandalorian, just fighting style in action. Just everything about that fight. And then there's the Petronaki Arena fight, which is so cool. Just a ton of Jedi. You get to see Mace Windu fighting. You get like a whole bunch of Jedi fighting. You see all those droids like closing in, and then the clones drop down and like pick them up with their gunships. And gunships are just so cool. And then the Battle of Geonosis, like outside of Petronaki Arena, isn't quite as cool. The Jedi don't really know tactics that well when the clones just listen to them, so they go in like a full frontal assault with like no protection or anything. But I mean, it makes sense, and it looks pretty cool. There's a lot of dust that kind of looks cool, and you get to see all the machines that they're going to use for later years in the Clone Wars, which is also very cool to see. So I love that. I love the Battle of Geonosis. One thing that surprised me on this particular viewing of, and by this particular viewing, I mean yesterday's viewing of Attack of the Clones, was Anakin and Obi-Wan's relationship, which a lot of people criticize as like, oh, they seem super awkward, and I kind of agreed with that. I was like, okay, it's not the best, but it's not too bad. But this time I actually got the feeling that like they were actually close friends, other than that one scene when like they first show up to Padme's room and Anakin and Obi-Wan are like talking back and forth, and Obi-Wan's like, you will follow my lead, and you will do everything I say, and you will do everything. And Anakin's like, and what if I don't want to? And then everyone else in the room is just like looking uncomfortably at them, and yeah, it's kind of awkward there. But everywhere else, it's like Obi-Wan is trying to help. Like he's a Jedi, so he's not like super in tune with other people's or with like how to express himself emotionally, because he's a Jedi. He's not supposed to express his emotions very strongly. But like other than that, which is a detail that makes sense, they seem to be getting along pretty well. And like all the lines that used to like trigger me, or not trigger me, just well, it is trigger. They trigger me to like see the relationship as awkward or strained or just not a good relationship. Now see me as just their banter. Like Anakin's like, I had to find a speeder that I really liked. Like that line, he's teasing it in the same way as he's saying, "Well, excuse me." It's like their friendly banter. And Obi-Wan, I think I've gotten more accustomed to Obi-Wan's style of how he treats his friends, basically, through the Clone Wars, and it makes some of the awkward scenes in Attack of the Clones make more sense, because it's like, oh, he's just, like having a good time with his friend. Another character that I really like in Attack of the Clones is Yoda. He doesn't do a whole lot. I mean, he just stands around giving advice for most of the movie and then fights Dooku at the end. But him, one of my favorite lines in this, in the entire movie, is what at the very end when Obi-Wan is like, well, if it hadn't been for the clones, it wouldn't have been a victory. And Yoda's like, victory? We just started a war, man. This is not a victory. And even though they won the battle, starting the war is a loss, which is a very profound statement, and I love Yoda for saying it. That's one of the reasons I like him so much as a character, is because he like has these things that he says that just make so much sense, and they're not like, they're just very wise statements, which I think is great for a character who's known for being wise. So Yoda throughout the movie says a whole bunch of wise things. He senses Anakin going to the dark side a bit, which is cool to see. I just like seeing Yoda in this movie. And then, of course, you see him battle Dooku, and he has got, of course, his own sense of humor, similar but different to Obi-Wan's. And he's talking. Count Dooku's like, Master Yoda. And he's like, Count Dooku. It's like, great, it's Master Yoda. I just love his sense of humor, and mix that with his wisdom, and you get a great character. Oh, and then also his fighting just looks awesome as well. Then another character in this episode, of course, is Palpatine, who, although you don't see Darth Sidious do much, and I do prefer watching Darth Sidious over Palpatine because he just looks cooler, he acts cooler, but you see a lot of Palpatine like setting up things, which is always it's so interesting to watch like Star Wars and see Palpatine like manipulating things, but the characters don't know, but you know, and so you see how his seemingly kind acts are actually selfish and motivated by greed. So not much here on Palpatine, but I just love seeing him in this movie. And then there's Dooku, who is originally introduced in this movie, and I mean, he's great. He like tries to get Obi-Wan to join him. That's a scene I always love, because it shows the more gray side of Dooku, which I do think that he is 100%, maybe not 100%. He's a Sith. Like, he's a dark side user. But oftentimes people see him in this gray light because he's trying to see this, or he's trying to make himself seem like this like this political leader rather than this like evil murderer monster. And there's just a few times in the Clone Wars where you see him really like be his evil self, and I think that's his true self. And the rest is just like Palpatine is, or just like Sidious is trying to be, or disguising himself as Palpatine. I think Dooku or Darth Tyrannus is disguising himself as Dooku. I mean, I could say Dooku is disguising himself as Dooku, but that doesn't get the point of it. It's technically accurate, but anyways. And then, yeah, so that's most of the characters that I really wanted to talk about. The rest are just cool characters. Padme's cool. Mace Windu's always cool. Kit Fisto, you see Kit Fisto, he's cool. Yeah, there's just a lot of Jedi, a lot of... Oh, one character that I do really like is Dexter. And I don't know what it is about Dexter. I think it's because... Okay, actually, I do know what it is. Dexter has this amazing backstory, like, that has never been told. He knows a Jedi, like, he's good friends with a Jedi, and this Jedi knows him for his weapons thing, and yet he's like a cook in a Coruscant diner restaurant. Like, what is his backstory? And that's always intrigued me. Okay, not always. That's intrigued me for about, like, 9 months, and I can't get this idea of, like, a Dexter book or a Dexter TV show or something out of my head. And super interested in that. So, Disney, if you're listening, if Lucasfilm is listening, you should definitely make that book. I'd love to read it. That'd be awesome. And leave a chat or a comment if you think that a Dexter book would be cool. So that's pretty much all I have to say about the characters in episode 2. But the plot of this movie is another cool thing about it, because this movie, like, okay, the plot of a lot of Star Wars movies is kind of not that important. Like, it doesn't make too much sense, but this movie is great. And it's, again, this idea of Palpatine manipulating everything, and he's doing this through starting the Clone Wars to gain more power, and eventually, after all of this time in war, he has so much power that he declares himself Emperor, and no one bats an eyelash. They applaud, and they probably blink a bit while clapping, but whatever. It's a pretty great plot, in the mystery around just the clones, the assassination attempts on Padme. It's all very intriguing, and it's great even when you watch it the second time, because, like, you know what's happening, but the other people don't. So another thing to mention about the plot is that it's not all good. Obviously, the Jedi and the Republic just accept this clone army. Like, sure, they don't really have much choice, because they would lose, like, 20 Jedis, but, like, they would be killed or become slaves to be bartered with, as Mace Windu says. So they get this clone army, but, like, how do they trust the clone army? Like, it came from this super shady background, and it makes sense why they continue to use it in, like, say, the Lost Ones episode, where they figure out that Count Dooku is actually the one who, like, called for the making of the clone army. But, like, and the reason why it makes sense is because if they stop using it, then they're going to lose the war. I'm losing my train of thought and just missing steps. But anyways, it doesn't really make sense for them to start using it now. Because, like, they don't know the full threat of the Separatists. They should probably, like, do some conscripting and get this, like, rely more on Jedis, or Jedi. I keep saying Jedis, it's not a word. But anyways, even though that doesn't make sense, the rest of the story makes sense, and it's very enjoyable, and who cares about the plot anyways? The setting is great. It's Star Wars. But one of my favorite things about Episode 2, in fact, it especially hit me this last time watching through on Saturday, was the score. John Williams just knocked it out of the park on Episode 2. He's got, like, a whole bunch of awesome new music. He's got, like, Across the Stars, which, even though I don't really like the Anakin and Padme romance scenes that much, the music for it is so good. You've got the Camino theme, which doesn't get much recognition, but I just love it. Like you've got like these swells that mimic the waves. It's very mysterious and dark and just a lot like an ocean, a lot like Camino. So I love that theme. Then you've got the like Trade Federation March, which is another great one. Just this driving beat behind it, and yet it's not like super repetitive. It's not like I don't know, 1, 2, 3, 4, and it's like dun, 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 but yet you've got this driving beat somehow behind it, and that's somehow like you've got like the drums and all the background, but the melody is not very rhythm, like it's not a very simple rhythm, but it still has this simple driving 1, 2, 3, 4 type beat behind it, which is cool. And then also the uses of his older scores, those being mostly from episode 1, like Duel of the Fates, with that Speederbike scene, which by the way, I've said it so many times, but Speederbikes are awesome, and I think this scene with Duel of the Fates and Anakin just going across towards the Tusken Raiders, is probably, hey Noah, how you doing? The chat is definitely working. Yes. Okay, great. So now I have confirmation that the chat is working, and I can see it. What do you think of the new, like, chat on the screen? How's that? Anything I should do to improve it or change it up somehow? And thanks for chatting in, Noah. Anyways, the Speederbike scene with Anakin going to the Tusken Raiders is awesome with Duel of the Fates, and I think it's why I like Speederbike so much is because of the Duel of the Fates. It's such a good scene, and I love the sunset behind him too when he talks to Jawas, which is nice. He's a mechanic. Yeah, I'm doing good. Thanks for asking. Another piece of the score that I really like in Attack of the Clones is I don't know what the name is, but it plays. I believe it plays 3 times during the prequels. One in Attack of the Clones, when the clones arrive at the Petronaki Arena to rescue the Jedi. It plays, and then also happens during the pod race, and in Revenge of the Sith, it happens when Anakin is crashing Grievous's starship, right at the beginning of the film. Yeah, it's dun 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 dun. I just love that one. It's so exciting. And the last one I want to touch on is the Imperial March, which plays at the very end of the film when the clones are going into these Star Destroyer type things, Venator class stuff, and they're flying up, and it's the start of the Clone Wars, and they play the Imperial March because the Clone Wars is what turns the Republic into the Empire, and it's so impactful, especially when you consider those words that I spoke about earlier with Yoda, where Yoda is talking about how even though they won the battle, and they're eventually technically going to win the war, it's not a win because it's a war. There's going to be a lot of chaos and death and destruction, so it's not a victory even though it's on paper it's a victory. So that's my thoughts on Attack of the Clones. I just loved it. I loved watching it again. This has been my favorite time ever watching Attack of the Clones this last Saturday. So that was great. I loved watching it. Leave your thought or leave your